whatever, who've been actively trying out some of this stuff with us this summer. And so I do have some feedback, which is good. I've had some actual people to test things on. I'm gonna try to share my screen. Nope, not that one. All right, so annotated reading, and specifically these are group annotated apps, right? So group annotations. And we're going to talk about two of those apps that happen to exist right now in Moodle for us, which is Hypothesis and Perusall. So Hypothesis was not originally developed as an educational app, so you might have used it or encountered it before as a Google Chrome extension. But the educational community has sort of asked for it apparently, and so now it also exists for LMSs, which is why we have that. And Perusall, which was sort of developed in the opposite way. So group annotations. How many of you have students read before or after class or during class? At any point, probably all of us at some point during our course have students read something, if not having them read every day. And so one thing that's cool about this is it makes reading a conversation, and better yet, an asynchronous conversation. And so that's one of the reasons I'm really fascinated by this, is making this an asynchronous conversation in a time when asynchronous and online capabilities are really important for our classes. So I like to use before class readings in conjunction with just-in-time teaching. And so I'm even looking at, like, instead of having a formalized reading warm-up, this is a neat way that it can be embedded in the reading itself, where I can still sort of get that feedback before we have a synchronous meeting about what those common questions or misconceptions are from students. And they can answer each other's questions, which is something that they can't do in the warm-ups that I normally give them. So, but this could also be used in thinking about after-class reading to maybe help them with an assignment or build on what you've talked about in a synchronous meeting, where they are also still able to keep having this conversation and helping each other out. So there's many reasons why you might want to do group annotations. So we're going to go through two pieces of software today, Hypothesis and Perusall. Hypothesis is where we'll start. It's a little more simple. Please interject with questions. I'm going to show you for both of these sort of an example of what assignments look like, and through that introduce to you what the capabilities are for students and for you. And then I'll go to Moodle and to actually show you like how to set these things up. So we're going to start with sort of what they are first. So Hypothesis was, again, not designed as an educational app. And so you're going to sort of see some of those differences arise between Perusall and Hypothesis just because of how they were originally developed. It's fairly simple to use. This is the more simple of the two. But because it is more simple to use, it also has more limitations as to what you can do. So with Hypothesis, you can annotate PDFs linked to a Google Drive or URLs. So this is a PDF assignment in Hypothesis. And so you can see the name of the assignment up here is Week 1 article. This is just a screenshot. You can actually see another example. The second example is actually on the Moodle page that Christy added you to. So this was on the Summer Chemistry Journal Club page. So it's on a different page. So you can see that they've got sort of this PDF in the background about viruses, and on the right-hand side, you've got a panel with comments. And so every time you have a highlight mark, basically students can highlight. Every time they highlight or you highlight something, a little box is going to pop up that looks like a little text box from a cartoon. And if you click it, it'll allow you to start typing. And you can type a note to yourself or to the whole class. Every time you have the option to either annotate to yourself, so only you can see that highlight and that annotation, or to everybody. But you can also go, I'm going to move this around, sorry. You can also go and reply. So there's this little sort of arrow on everyone's comment where you can hit that and reply to someone else's comment instead of creating a brand new annotation. So you can see that this second comment here actually has 2 replies. And so that's sort of the functionality of this. Basically, that's what you can do in Hypothesis. One of the downsides to this, as you might notice, is this panel collapses in and out, but when it's collapsed out, it actually covers up part of your PDF. And there's no way to fix that. No apparent way, anyways, to fix that in this version of Hypothesis. So that's a little bit annoying. I think Katie Ann is not here, but she mentioned that that was annoying. And so The other thing you can do, because now this is the Moodle version and not the Google Chrome version, you can actually filter all of the comments by student. So 27 students did this assignment. I could use the drop-down menu to say, show me only Jennifer Musica's comments, right? And it would filter out Jennifer, and then I could look at Jennifer's contributions and assign a grade and submit the grade to the Moodle gradebook, assuming that I've set that up, right? You can give this app permission to link to the Moodle gradebook. So that's kind of nice, right? So if you wanted to give them some sort of participation points or some sort of grade based on their contributions once in a while, right, you absolutely can do that. All right, so the other type of thing you can do, so this is a PDF that happened to be in my Google Drive, is you can link to a website, and it's going to make a copy the day you select that website. So this one's actually an NPR article that maybe some of you are familiar with, gets updated every day. Maybe you avoid it like the plague because it's really depressing, but it gets updated with COVID-19 data in the United States every day. And this one's actually, I'm actually going to get out of this for a second. We're going to go, here we go. So this is what it looks like actually on Moodle. And so you can tell that this is from, oh, actually it did update. Oh, I thought this was a copy for the day, but it's updated to today. So that's also kind of cool. So apparently it will update in Hypothesis. It will not in Perusall. So it is updated. And it looks pretty much just like if you go to NPR's website and click on this. The interactive data remains interactive. And so if you wanted students to engage with data that is on a website, you actually, Hypothesis will allow you to do that. They can comment on any of this text. So I could select text and so you can see this little annotate button, right? I could start typing and type in an annotation. It won't let you annotate so easily on this. So you'll see that that box doesn't pop up when I highlight something that's connected to a figure. So I can only comment on the article text, but I could comment right above a figure or right below if I wanted to say something about this interactive graph. And so if you do regularly have students use that kind of data that's on the web, this would be a really nice way to have them have a conversation around that data. So that's a fun thing. All right, so moving forward a little bit. So how do you set this up in Moodle? So this is Hypothesis and Perusall both. If you go to add a new activity to your Moodle page, you're always going to select this external tool, which is the green puzzle piece. And once you select that, it opens up something like this, and you'll see that you have Perusall as this pre-configured tool drop-down menu. You have Perusall, you also have Hypothesis. So here we've selected Hypothesis, and you can give this activity a name. We'll talk about naming is kind of important in Perusall. It's not so important in Hypothesis. You can give it whatever name you want. Hopefully a name that your students will know to click. And so under privacy, which is right below sort of that drop-down menu, the next tab is privacy. If you want to link to the gradebook, you'd want to make sure that you click this accept grades from the tool, which I think Christy set up as the default setting for both of these, because I haven't had to click it yet. But so once you link it to the gradebook, you can actually then, you have all the grading options that you normally would for an assignment. And so you can set this up to send grades back to gradebook just like you would any other assignment in Moodle. And then you'll notice that like here, there was actually not, the URL box doesn't actually let you put anything in it. There's nowhere for you to put content when you're originally setting up an assignment for Hypothesis. So you actually have to completely set up the assignment and then click on it to open it. And the first time you open it, so you want to make sure that you either do this ahead of time or that it's hidden initially so that a student doesn't accidentally click on it first. Because the first time it's opened is when it will prompt you to add content. And you'll have exactly two options, right? You have this enter URL for a web page or select a PDF from a Google Drive, and it'll ask you to log into your Google Drive. So if you did want a student to add the content, this would be one way to make it hidden to only one student until the content was added, but you might have to play with that. All right. So Hypothesis sort of pros and cons. It's pretty clean and simple and fairly easy to navigate. You don't have a lot of options, which makes it pretty easy to use. The learning curve is pretty low. It does connect to the gradebook. but all grading is manual. There's no automated grading in Hypothesis or anything like that. So you are having to click through each student and say, assign the student this many points, assign this student this many points for everything that you want to grade. It will only link to PDFs or websites, but still that's quite a bit of things. It does not work well with LibreText or OpenStax, even though the URL versions of those. So I think I posted an example of Hypothesis with one of the two on the Moodle page. The browser version works fine with these, but it really messes with the formatting, particularly of LibreText and OpenStax interactive textbooks from the URLs. Those are the two websites I found that really have a significant change in formatting and functionality, whereas everything else seems to remain fully functional. And there's also sort of it's not easy to make groups, and there's no sort of analytical data on students if that's something that you're interested in. This is sort of just the simple group annotation, easy to set up and easy to move forward with. All right, so the other program that we have is a lot more complicated, but it also gives you a lot more options and a lot more information. It also gives students a lot more options on how they sort of interact. And that's Perusall. And one of the reasons for that is that it was specifically designed for educational use. So it was designed with sort of the scholarship of teaching and learning and thinking about how students absorb or learn new information and how they interact with that information in mind. So Perusall is going to be very different functionally from Hypothesis, even though it's sort of the same idea of still group annotation. And there's also going to be a lot more options, both in what students can annotate and how they can annotate. And it's going to look a little bit different. So we're going to go through some examples with Perusall, and then we'll talk about setting up. Perusall is not as simple as setting up on the Moodle side. There's a whole nother step on the Perusall side. But I would argue it's worth it if you're willing to take a little bit of time to figure it out the first time. So hopefully this will help you figure it out the first time if that's what you want to do. So this is an example of a PDF assignment, again, from this journal club. So it's a paper all about the chemistry of viruses. And maybe that's not exciting to you. Maybe it is, I don't know. So one thing to notice is still the panel on the right side is all of these comments. And on the left, you have the paper, and you've got highlights and comments, sort of the same idea. But you might notice that the comments no longer hide half the page, right? So this also collapses in and out, but you don't have to collapse it back in to be able to fully read whatever it is that you're annotating, which is kind of a nice feature. So that's built a little bit better. And so here, again, you can still highlight text and add comments or replies. And so the highlights here are blue instead of yellow. They're kind of hard to see. But you've got this list, and this list is sort of all of the comments. If you click on a specific highlight, it's just going to show you that one thread of comments that pertain to the highlight. But otherwise, it's going to show you all of them. And so you've got this full long list that you could either click on, and this is organized by page. So I could click on a specific comment and it'll take me to that part of the text, or I could click on a highlight in the text and it'll take me to that string of comments. Either way. And so some of these comments have sort of circled numbers to the right. That means that people have already replied, right? So 2 people have replied to this comment, 3 people have replied to this question. And so if you click on that, you're actually going to open up the full thread. So a few other quirks about commenting. So if I select a comment, it goes from blue to pink, and all of a sudden I just see that thread. So this is a particular question that had 3 replies, or more questions, really more questions to it. So you'll see this orange question, and some of these have grayed out question marks to the left of the comment. So students can click that, or you can click that to indicate that they also have that question, right? And so Perusall actually collects that data for you about how many people click to say they also want to know the answer. And if you click to say you want to know the answer, you're going to get update notifications via email about anything that gets responded to this, right? So if someone else comes and adds a new response, Perusall is going to send you an email. I imagine you can change those settings for notifications. I don't know how to do that yet, but right now I know that it does. So you can also, I don't know if you can tell this blue because I've blocked out the name under it, but you can tag students, or students can tag each other. So if they're like, hey, we were just talking about this the other day. I don't know if you've seen this, right? They could actually tag each other, or you could think about maybe specifically tagging a student and calling on them essentially to provide a response. If it's something that you know you've already talked with that student about, you know that they have a good answer, maybe. So that's something that you can absolutely do. Another quirky thing is this weird green check mark on the other side, or the grayed out ones simply mean they haven't been clicked yet. So a student or you can indicate that a response was particularly good or particularly helpful. Again, Perusall is going to collect all of that data for you and say this was the most upvoted or helpful response that was marked by your students. And so if you're like, oh, that's really down the wrong path, right? That might be a place where you want to say, hey, just kidding, guys, let's redirect. That's not quite the right direction that I want you to take here. But you can also see what the common questions are. So Perusall is going to collect common questions and popular, helpful responses for you, which is a great way to sort of catch misconceptions or common questions. So again, this is, I don't have this pulled up, but this is the same NPR article in Perusall. And so the text sort of looks the same, but all of those tables and interactive graphs are now these blue, they look like they're supposed to be hyperlinks. They don't work. So Perusall does not do well with keeping the formatting. It changes it a little bit, and it loses all interactivity for data. So if you're going and using a website, Perusall, if you want to use data, you should use Hypothesis, not Perusall for that kind of assignment, just because it does basically cut apart all of that functionality. And a couple other things about commenting. You can always see who comments, right? That's marked by initials, but you can also scroll over so you can tell that I added this comment, which is why it's visible. But when students go to add another comment or question below, they have sort of this, I don't know, he kind of looks like the Hamburglar to me, but I'm not sure. There's like this little symbol to the side where students can click that and respond anonymously, which thanks Jennifer. Jennifer tested this for me. I didn't see it. Jennifer was like, what is this? So students could actually respond anonymously and all of their peers would not see these initials. They wouldn't see who posted it, but you as the instructor can always see who posts something. And it will actually like put a red box around it to indicate to you that, hey, this student wanted to be anonymous. And so if you have, right, like if you're afraid of issues where students might be responding anonymously because they want to say something not very nice to another student or start some trouble, right? Like it might be worthwhile saying that, hey, I always know that you've marked yourself anonymous and who you are and what you said. But you can also make assignments completely anonymous where students who maybe are more shy are always responding anonymously, but you're still able to give them credit for their responses. So that could be good or bad.
Question.
Yes.
So would it make sense to use both in the same course or to choose one over the other depending on the assignment?
So I was actually thinking about doing both depending on the assignment. I see myself probably mostly using Perusall, but for any instance where I would want to use interactive data, I think Hypothesis, right, allows for that. And either way, sort of on the student end, when they click on the link on Moodle, it's still a green puzzle piece, sort of the symbol. And so they don't look much different on the Moodle page as far as the link, and the functionality isn't that different. I tried both with Summer Journal Club, and students used both and didn't actually say anything as to the fact that it had changed. So I know that they noticed visually it was different, but they seemed to be fine with using either or.
Well, I think they like Perusall better.
Yeah.
Somebody said that to me.
Okay, that's good to know. So
another question. Can either of the tools be used with visual content like painting?
So Perusall can be used with visual content, and so could Hypothesis if it was like a PDF or a URL. So maybe not URL. URL gets funky in Perusall, but they wouldn't have anything that they could actually highlight. But both of them allow you to do what are called like page comments or page notes. So if you're looking at, like, if you've got like a series of visual data on different pages, they could still comment on it. It just wouldn't be linked to any one thing. They can also, Perusall, I'm going to show you in a minute, can also do video content. And that does get marked with a timestamp. So depending on the format, yes, but it changes it a little bit. All right, so the other thing that you can do with this is students have a lot of options. They can reply with text in either one, but here they also have emojis if your students really like emojis. I think they're fun. The students in Journal Club don't seem to agree. The chemists think they're fun. But they also have law tech, so if you wanted a math response or an equation response, they can actually type that. They can also respond with pictures, images, links, videos. So they have a lot of options for how they respond or how they leave their reply or their question, which may be useful to you, maybe not, in thinking about sort of universal design kind of things. Okay. So also, again, as I mentioned, a brand new feature Perusall this summer that they just rolled out last month, apparently, is that you can now link videos to Perusall. So this is a YouTube video. It's probably not very exciting for most of you. It's about molecular orbitals. It's from the spring. But one of the things you might notice is this all comments on the side window is now divided up by minutes. So it's showing me what comments happened in the first minute, second minute, third minute, etc. And there's some little blue circles on sort of the time stamp marks on the bottom. And those indicate that there are comments at those exact time markers. So you can also click a time marker to see what's going on at that time marker. So if a student starts to type a question, it's going to pause the video and automatically timestamp their comment. Just like in YouTube or in Ensemble, they can speed you up, they can slow you down. They can't turn on closed captioning, but you can lock closed captioning in. So if you're linking YouTube content that's your own or any video content that is your own, you can actually lock the closed captioning on, which is something I didn't do in this video. I learned this after because that made me mad that I couldn't turn on closed captioning, but you can lock closed captioning on your video. And I think that's actually what maybe Robin did when she went from YouTube to Ensemble, was lock the closed captioning on, because I know her Ensemble videos had closed captioning as well. So that's sort of an interesting feature. That's one of the things you can do with Perusall that you absolutely can't do with Hypothesis right now. All right. You can also add textbooks to Perusall, again, designed for educational use. So they have something like 200,000 textbook titles that you could use. And so you can search for these. If you go to add a textbook, you can, to your class, you can search by all sorts of parameters up here. So right now I have it showing university science books. And if I click on this inorganic book, it's going to tell me the price per student is $50. So what this means is the student is, the first time they log on to Perusall and go to an assignment that uses this book, they're going to be prompted to buy this ebook. But they would have perpetual online access. So they could set up an external Perusall account and they would be able to access this book through Perusall's website forever, is the idea. But they would only be able to use it through Perusall. Some of the books also have renting options, and they advertise that their prices are all fairly similar to what you get external to Perusall. I looked up only a couple of books and they were pretty similar, like within $5 of the exact same price I found them other places, for the most part. So that is also an option if you want to do that. So I'm actually going to do this stuff outside of Perusall. So I'm going to go back to, nope, here. All right. So here, if you set up a Perusall, right, which is going to be the exact same thing in Moodle, again, you're sort of going to add an assignment, you're clicking the external tool, and this time instead of selecting Hypothesis, you're selecting Perusall and you're giving it a name. The first time you open Perusall, you're going to be taken to this sort of dashboard, instructor dashboard, or instructor course home is what they call it. And it's going to prompt you to go through this Getting Started tab, which has a video tutorial of all the things you could possibly ever want to do and all sorts of advice and information. You're going to have a library tab, which is all the content that you've uploaded that you could potentially create an assignment with. You're going to have an assignment tab, which is going to show all the assignments you've created. And then a student tab, which is just going to show you the students enrolled in your class. Thanks for my lovely subjects earlier this summer. All right.
Hey,
So, yes.
question. Do faculty need a separate account on Perusall to access the interface?
Nope. So as soon as it uses your Moodle login, right? So this is basically, you'll notice at the top of your page, it'll say Perusall created through Moodle. And same with the students. So if they want to keep accessing their textbook when they lose access to your Moodle page, that's when they would need to set up a Perusall account through Perusall itself. And so here, if I'm in the library, the first step you would need to do anything in Perusall is add content. And so you can either use the green button over here, or you can, this is already selected to add content, right? There's two places to add content. I have no idea why. There's two places to do just about everything in Perusall. That's a theme. So folders aren't actually a folder of content. It's just a folder in here where you could organize content potentially, right? So it's just a way to organize the content that you've already added. You can add a textbook, which again, if I click here, it's going to take me back to the same sort of page that I just showed you, where you can now search for a textbook and add it. And it will make you request title. It takes about 12 hours for them to email you back saying that your request has been approved. If you find a book that they don't have, you can also request a book that they don't have, and that takes longer, but they will try to work with that publisher to get access for you. You can add a web page, right? So if you click web page, it's going to prompt you for a URL. You can also add documents from a Dropbox or from your computer, and these have to be PDF, Word, or EPUB documents.
Hey, Kristen, sorry, another question.
Go for it.
So the books that they're getting, they're just ebooks that they're getting? Is it from a specific library?
So they're working with, I think it's 50 something publishers.
Okay.
So I think it shows up in Perusall. It's like buying it. If you buy it through, right, like Apple Books, you can only use it in that app. This is the same thing.
Okay.
They could set up a Perusall account for when the class ends to still use that book. Or if they were in, for instance, like Jeff Fieberg and I have talked about using a book in both the class I teach and the class that students take after in his class. And so the students would only buy it one time and be able to use it in Perusall for both courses.
But then do they sell the books back or? No. Okay.
So the ones that have a rental option, right, that's when they would sort of like lose access over time. But yeah, there's no selling it back because it's a digital version.
Okay.
Which, yeah. One of the downfalls of using a textbook in here, definitely. You can get materials from another course, so you can actually get a share code from someone else who also has a Perusall and steal their resources or share resources. And then you can add videos. I don't know what iClicker is. I have no idea. So maybe one of you knows what iClicker is, but I have no idea what it is. That content is also available if you know what it is. So one of the things that's added in here is actually the full OpenStax chemistry textbook as a PDF, which is a free textbook for students to download or use online. And so Perusall wanted to charge $9 for students, or $9 or $10 for students to access basically an interactive version. But what I did was just throw the whole PDF in here because the PDF is free to download. So that is one thing you can do with OpenStax books because you can download them. If you're already using sort of an OER, you would just want to look for that download option so that you could load the open educational book in. So once you have things in your library, you can create assignments. And so if I want to create a new assignment, right, would go to this assignment tab. It's going to show me all the other assignments I have and give me options for each of those assignments. I can edit the deadlines or add a new assignment. So if I click the green button, it's going to ask me for content. It's going to show me everything in my library. So say I want to do this paper. So I've selected this paper. I can select the whole paper, or I can select pages. So for instance, if I had selected the chemistry textbook, I'd want to select either specific chapters or specific pages. And you can assign those pages. They don't have to be consecutive. So say I wanted pages 1 and 2, but then I also want 5 through 8. I can just say add another part and put 5 through 8. So now it's only going to show students those 2 page ranges and ask them to comment on those specific page ranges. So say I don't know, save changes. Actually, we're just going to click the next one. So we're going to go set name and deadline, which is up here at the top. So I could set a deadline. I can give it an assignment name. If I give it an assignment name here, once I create this assignment, it's going to give me an option to copy the title of the assignment back into Moodle. And so if you do that, then your Moodle link, if they have the exact same name, when students click it, they're going to bypass this whole sort of dashboard view and go immediately into the assignment, just like Hypothesis is. So I would strongly recommend that, and that will avoid them seeing all the assignments and clicking on the wrong one. So let's give this, I don't know, test 1. And you can write some instructions for your students. There's also advanced options, so it will auto grade for you. I don't know how well that does because I've only had students who are volunteering to do things and not getting grades. The override here, or the default here is 7 because I haven't played with that. But I could say I want it to grade 2 annotations per student. And I could set when this becomes visible to students. I could also assign this to specific students. So one thing you can do in Perusall is say, I only want this to go to Jennifer and Ava because they're going to do this project and this paper is to help them with their project. And I'm going to give a different paper to everyone else in the class or to this other group of students. So you can do that, and then the assignment is only available for those students. You can make it fully anonymous. So if you leave the assign to specific students blank, it assigns to the whole class by default. You can make it fully anonymous so that they never know who's responding or asking questions, but you always know. As the instructor, you always know who wrote what, but that would mean that your students wouldn't know. So if you really wanted students to be really, really honest and not be afraid of being honest, maybe it was sensitive content that they're discussing, right? That might be an option. You can also make an assignment optional, which means it won't grade it or penalize students in any way for, that's going to ignore the grades at that point. So I could save these changes. It's going to create this, well, maybe not. This might be my internet just acting up. All right. So anyways, you can create that assignment. So if I were to go, oh, it is test 1. It's right here. It's highlighted. Just kidding. So the name is kind of hidden. The name is actually under the content name. So it has this ACS Biochem as the bolded font, and test 1 is like the small font underneath, which is the actual name of the assignment. So I could use this copy full title for LMS. It's going to copy it to the clipboard. If I go back and create a Perusall link on Moodle and say test 1, when students click it, it will immediately go to this view, right? So they're already ready to annotate. They're bypassing sort of that other screen. All right. And so you've got, you can extend deadlines. You can do a lot of things. And go to a different one here. We're going to go to, there's some options up here that you might notice that you can click on during or after an assignment. A lot of analytical data, if you're interested in that. Again, this is made by people who study how people learn. So they care about that data. And so, I can tell a grade distribution because it's auto grading. I can see when most annotations were added by the class, as a heat map, so by day and time. I can also see an activity report. Some of them also have a breakdown of which page. So this one's not going to have that because it is, bring it back here. Page view. So if it is something that has pages, it will actually show you how many comments and average reading time per page. So if your students are only reading the first page, it will tell you that, Like your students spend 99% of their time on page 1. They never moved past page 1, So even if they distributed comments on the other pages, it would tell you that they didn't spend any time reading necessarily, or very little time reading. So it'll tell you exactly where they read. So there's a lot of information there. I don't know what I would do with all that data, but maybe that's interesting. I haven't gotten the confusion report to work, which might be because I have too few participants that are voluntary, but this should be based on the most commonly asked questions, according to Perusall, like the company. You can also see, I can click here to download a spreadsheet of, right, this is only one, but you could download this as a spreadsheet if you wanted that one comment from Aaron Walker. It will show you all your comments, and you can download them as a spreadsheet or a Word document. It's going to give you some details about how many people have completed or opened the assignment, and it's going to tell you the most popular comments and the most active students. And that's sort of always going to be right up front on the assignment in your view, right? Your students don't see that. There is a student view over here. I'm not going to click it right now because it's going to end up logging me out of Perusall. It's what I haven't figured out how to get back. But there is a student view, so you can always see what students can see versus what you can see. Grading. So you can also get a lot of data. Like if you go to your roster, you can click on an individual student and it will give you some data and analytics about a particular student. It will also give you the option, for instance, if I go here, I could change a student's score, right? So it's an auto-graded comment. So Ava, it auto-graded your comment, awesome, you got the maximum points. But say it auto-graded as a 1, and I was like, oh, actually this is really good, I'm gonna change this. You could auto-change to it, or you could manually change the grade before it sends to Moodle Gradebook. Okay. So there's also, if we go to this sort of left-hand panel of settings, this is where you can change your grading and also create groups. So we're gonna sort of skip the first 2 groups. I will warn you that so you can automatically sort of have Perusall divide your class into half or quarters, or you can manually assign groups. If you change the groups, say halfway through, and a student goes back to study and look at an old assignment, the old conversations that were on that assignment that that student was able to see will be gone if those people are no longer in their new group. So it does warn you that you should not change the groups. That like if you set groups because your class is big enough that you don't want to overwhelm your students, you should keep them the same throughout, at least for Perusall. So that is something that maybe is not as awesome. That doesn't affect if you assign something specifically to only a group of students, but this would be like your class-wide assignments that it would affect. So then there's scoring and advanced are both about grading. You have sort of 2 options. Annotation content only is going to evaluate 100% of the grade is based on what their annotation is and what their algorithm decides is the score of that annotation. And you do have options to like change some of that. You also have this holistic grading, which is going to say 60% of a student's score that goes into Moodle Gradebook is based on what they write. And the other 40% is based on other ways that they might interact with the assignment. And so maybe it's how many times they open the assignment before the due date to check on who else has commented. Maybe it's how many times they respond, or right, maybe not a text response, but maybe they're clicking the upvote or the question button on other people's comments and questions. It's going to give them some credit for doing that. It's going to give them some credit for how long their active reading time is that it calculates. So anything like that, it's going to start giving them some credit for doing those kinds of things for that other 40%. And you can change all of these percentages. You have what feels like a million options between the scoring and the advanced. But there's a lot there you could play with. I can't tell you much about the auto grading because I haven't really checked to see what it's doing because I'm not assigning grades for anything this summer. But you can also set a score range. Again, you can sync these grades in the advanced tab. You have this option to send your grades back to your LMS, to Moodle, or not send them back, or to only send them back when you manually tell it to. So instead of automatically doing it once a week, you're saying, I want to do it when I'm ready. You can allow students to download all course material. It will tell you this doesn't apply to the textbooks. You can mark that students should not be able or should be able to earn credit after the deadline. So students can always open an assignment even if the deadline is passed. They can look at comments, they can add comments. It's whether or not they get any points for that. So you can change those settings. You can enable assignment reminders, which is basically going to say, hey, you have 24 hours till this is due. You haven't opened it yet, so it's going to email those students and say, reminder, you have an assignment due today. You should do that. And right, so you've got sort of a lot of options. I feel like that was a lot. Are there questions or things you want to know? So I would say that sort of the pros and cons for Perusall, you have a lot of options and students have a lot of options. Just like Hypothes.is, it connects to the gradebook. It does auto grade for you, which when I think about 6 weeks, that becomes a lot more important to me than it would have been before. But there is also, because there's so many options, so much flexibility, there's more of a learning curve. And also I would caution you against using URLs. You might want to double check to make sure that it's not completely unformatting them, if that makes sense. Whereas Hypothes.is, you don't have to watch out for that quite as much. Oh, thanks for that reminder, Eva. Yes. So yeah, it might be worthwhile to explore how to change the notifications or turn off notifications and tell your students how to do that, or how to change them to make it most effective for your students. Because if you think about 6 weeks and maybe having an assignment 3 times a week or even every day, those notifications could get really overwhelming, especially if, every time you comment on something, now that whole thread you're going to get notifications about. You might not want that. So. Anything else?
Hey, Kristen, I'm just going to ask you this rather than type it out. You said that they can annotate video content.
Mm-hmm.
You said that different types of video content work differently. So like you had YouTube there. What if you've got some video content that you've got recorded,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that you want to put up in Perusall where they could work on that? Can they do that? Can they annotate that stuff?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be YouTube. It can be Vimeo, YouTube. You could link to Ensemble. Now, if you've got questions in Ensemble, that's probably going to mess with the functionality of those questions. But any video content that you have either in Dropbox or on your computer, or that you've got a URL for because you've uploaded it somewhere, you should be able
Right, so and it's like MP4 stuff.
anything that's an MP4, basically. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, hopefully I haven't overwhelmed you, and I think Perusall is pretty neat. I also think.
Sorry. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go for it.
Since we got time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're adding content, so you've already got to have your content added or available.
Yeah. So you can't.
In order to bring it in.
Yeah, so you can't create an assignment until you add something to your library. Now, but you could add something to your library and 2 minutes later create an assignment with it.
And the library is specific to these software packages.
Yes, so Perusall will never own your content. That is something that they make pretty clear, because I did look into that. Like if I upload something that's mine to Perusall, is Perusall have some sort of copyright ownership over that? They don't. So there, it's simply linked, and you have, like, no one else can see that unless you, or they're in your class and you give them permission to.
So in essence, you're basically linking things.
Yeah.
So it's not a separate library that's in Perusall, but rather it's a set of links between Perusall and wherever you've got your stuff stored.
Yes.
But then we can reorganize
Mm-hmm.
those links within Perusall, so
Yes.
that you can create new folders to put things in.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which, if you have a lot of like things, right, I found that it's really useful to use the folders. And then you can also, right, you could transfer those links to another class that you're teaching that's also using Perusall, or you could choose to not, and when the class is over, all those links are now just gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And you could link up, say you're teaching 2 sections, you could link both of those classes to the same set of assignments.
I think you can.
Or would you have
that
to?
That might be a little
separately?
weird because it's going through Moodle, so it might mean that your Moodle page would have to be.
Yeah, so that might be, you'd have to set up like a meta course.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have time, like, right now. I actually have another meeting to run to, but at some point, Kristen, I want to talk to you about the use of Perusall for videos.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that I had, because what I was going to do was, have students go and post questions or discussion things in Slack. And it seems like Perusall might actually be a more integrated system for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we absolutely can. Just let me know.
Cool, thank you.
Do you have a preference between Perusall and Hypothesis?
So I like Perusall and that my students can respond with LaTeX. That's also a game changer because all the chemistry classes I teach are really math heavy. And so I like that they can sort of respond in different ways. And I've really liked how Journal Club has used it this summer. They do seem a lot more active on Perusall, and I don't know if that's because, right, Hypothesis was the first week and they were like, I don't know what's happening. And now we're in week 5 and they're pros, but the students seem more active on Perusall. But if I use any sort of interactive data, like, hey, this is this news article, I would definitely use Hypothesis for that. And that would be the exception. But Perusall was scary when I first opened it and was like, I don't know if I'm excited or terrified that there's a million options. And then I'm like sort of always tempted to click on the data and I'm like, I don't actually need this data. Like, it's cool that you collect it, but I don't want it right now. So that can be, there's a lot of sort of shiny things in Perusall that I think can be really distracting. Right, that there's just all these other options that you probably don't need.
But if you stay fairly, you can choose how much of that you want to use, right?
Right, you can ignore that
It's
stuff.
close to the ground and use it basically like you would use Hypothesis without all of the bells and whistles.
Absolutely. And then the perk is that it will auto grade if you're assigning sort of participation points. You can pretty much let it do that for you, which makes a lot of sense in the 6-week format of a class when there's not a lot of time.
If you were going to use something synchronously, would Hypothesis be better than Perusall, or either one?
I think either one. So our journal club, we have these sort of synchronous Zoom discussions, and then they have asynchronous time using Perusall to actually like post questions and comments and replies. But actually I took a screenshot. I should share that, but I'm not on the right computer. Wrong device. But I took a screenshot of actually in the middle of one of the Zoom sessions because I wasn't the discussion leader, so I was just facilitating Zoom. And there were like 20 people on Perusall at once, and you can actually see as the instructor, I don't know if you can see this as a student, but you can see everyone who's on right now. And so they were actually actively screen sharing different figures and the conversation that went with those figures in their breakout rooms, which was really useful because they could, oh, I had a new insight. I can actually add this from my breakout room to this discussion. So it's saved there so that everyone can now see it when we go to study for our test or prepare for an assignment.
Sorry, I've got another question. So if you have reserve material that you've gone through the library to get, and so that's there. Can you link that to Perusall?
I have no idea. That might be a library question.
Either one, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
just wondering. I'm wondering if, because you.
I can actually chime in on that. This is Caroline from the library.
Yeah, I was hoping that you would, Caroline.
The answer to that would probably be no, because our licensing works a little different. So with regards to the way that Kristen showed us where you can assign them a book, that wouldn't work. But if you can provide a link to the ebook that the library is providing, then you can use that link to annotate things most of the time. There would probably be a few, just like you had a few of those little issues with the OpenStax type books. There might be, you'd need to test it to make sure there's no issues with our links, but most of our links are to PDFs. So you could link to those PDF links and then use it. And that's kind of the way you'd have to do it.
And there don't seem to be any formatting issues with PDFs. PDFs tend to be very safe.
Okay, in that case, then yeah, it would probably work out really well. Our links are either going to be PDFs or HTMLs, and both of those are links, and they should both work. So you just have to use the link for the e-reserve and then annotate that, rather than going through that book purchase thing that Kristen showed us.
So I could give them a link to something that's on JSTOR?
Yes. Yeah, that would work. They'd have to be logged. If they're off campus, they'd have to be logged in. But yes, you could do that. I've actually done that before with Hypothesis, I know for a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm leaving. Thanks. It's really helpful. Thanks, guys.
Any last questions? We're about out of time. Thank you so much, Kristen. This was wonderful.
I'm glad it was helpful.
Hope everybody got something out of this. This was very useful, and it is recorded, so those who couldn't make it will have it available on our website. But thank you for your time, and thank you all for attending. Hope you have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
All right. See ya.
Bye.